I adjusted the collar of my charcoal coat, standing in the grand glass atrium of Sterling Caldwell Group's downtown Denver headquarters. My family brushed past me in waves, dressed in winter cashmere and arrogance, chattering as they entered the executive boardroom. Not one paused. I was a ghost to them, just as I had been for nearly a decade. "Natalie, what on earth are you doing here?" My uncle Martin Caldwell's voice cut sharply across the atrium. He stood in the boardroom doorway, his Rolex flashing under the chandelier, framed by walls of polished walnut and power. "I'm here for the meeting," I said evenly, holding up the outdated company badge with my maiden name. "I still own shares, the ones Grandpa left me." The room behind him stirred with amused whispers. My cousin Jared let out a dry chuckle. "Those old Series Dash shares? They are ceremonial, Natalie. They were stripped of voting rights when you ghosted the company." He wasn't wrong. 9 years ago, when I refused to sell my small stake in Caldwell Group, Uncle Martin orchestrated a shareholder vote to reclassify my shares, a strategic move meant to silence me. And it worked. On paper. "This meeting is for decision makers," Uncle Martin said with a self-satisfied grin. "For family members who've actually contributed something to this business. You work in finance, right? What is it now? Admin work at a boutique firm?" If only they knew. My cousin Becca leaned in with mock sweetness. "Let me guess. You'll be enlightening us with your experience fetching coffee for stockbrokers." More laughter. They didn't know that I wasn't working for a firm, I owned it. The boutique firm was a shadow entity for Redcrest Holdings, the ultra-discreet private equity firm I built from scratch. They also didn't know that Redcrest Holdings had, over the past 6 months, acquired 48% of Sterling Caldwell Group through a cascade of anonymous holding companies. "This meeting is to save the company," Martin declared, straightening his tie with authority. "We're negotiating with a high-level investor this morning. Frankly, Natalie, this is beyond your scope." Then came the best part. He shut the door in my face. I glanced at my watch. Right on time. I walked briskly to the executive elevator, used my biometric key, and rode to the top floor. The one with no plaque, no directory listing, and no welcome mat. Inside was my private suite, the real headquarters of Redcrest. I slipped off my coat and stepped into a deep navy Armani suit. It was understated but expensive enough to make a statement. My assistant Alyssa was already waiting. "They're all seated. They still think Redcrest is sending in a male CEO." I smiled, opening the leather portfolio she handed me. "Let's give them the surprise they've earned. The paperwork is prepared exactly as you requested." Alyssa handed me the leather portfolio. I opened it and carefully reviewed the documents one last time. Acquisition agreements, voting rights reinstatements, executive reshuffles. Everything was there. With one signature, I would take control of Sterling Caldwell Group. "How much time do I have?" I asked, though I already knew. "They're all in the boardroom," Alyssa said, unable to hide a smirk. "Mr. Caldwell just began presenting the company's financial crisis to the rest of the family, and they're expecting a representative from Redcrest Holdings." I nodded slowly, my eyes narrowing in reflection. 9 years ago, I was 26, fresh out of Stanford with an MBA and a bold pitch to restructure our aging logistics arm. I still remember the laughter. Martin Caldwell had leaned back in his leather chair, swirling a tumbler of scotch. "Leave the numbers to the real businessmen, Natalie," he said. "Your job is to find a husband, not a spreadsheet." So, I walked out that night, out of the boardroom, out of the family's gilded spotlight, and took my grandmother's parting gift, a modest trust fund, some advice on patience, and my own last name. I built Redcrest Holdings in the shadows. Silent partnerships, strategic acquisitions, total discretion. Over nearly a decade, I watched my relatives steer Sterling Caldwell Group toward ruin with outdated thinking and entitled bickering. And now, the boardroom they wouldn't let me speak in was desperate for a bailout, courting a mysterious investor they believed held the key to saving their legacy. "Send the signal," I said. Alyssa tapped her phone. A discreet message was sent to the executive assistant inside the boardroom. "The CEO of Redcrest Holdings has arrived." I stood, closed the portfolio, and glanced at the full-length mirror on the wall. Gone was the quiet, polite niece in last season's blazer. Now, I wore a navy, silk-lined suit, custom-tailored in Milan, the kind of armor power wraps itself in. Elisa opened the door. Ready? I let a slow smile tug at the corner of my mouth, remembering Uncle Martin's patronizing smirk when he shut that boardroom door in my face just minutes earlier. Oh, I've been ready for 9 years. The corridor to the boardroom felt different now, less like a hallway, more like a runway. Each step pulsed with the quiet force of every deal I'd made, every board I'd flipped, every percentage I'd acquired in secret. Behind those glass-paneled doors sat the very people who'd spent years laughing at me, unaware that they were about to sell the company to the woman they once called irrelevant. I straightened my posture, nodded at Elisa, and pushed open the doors. The room fell into instant silence. Uncle Martin was mid-sentence, slides showing lost projections still glowing behind him. He turned, and for a brief second, I watched confusion twist into cautious excitement. He didn't recognize me. He just saw power. Alyssa stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice sharp and poised, "allow me to introduce the CEO of Redcrest Holdings." I stepped into the light, and for the first time in 9 years, they listened. I scanned the room slowly, letting the silence stretch. Every eye was locked on me. My cousin Jared, usually glued to his phone during meetings, had gone completely still. Becca's hand, mid-reach for her latte, hovered awkwardly in the air. The temperature in the room had shifted, years of smug certainty evaporating into confusion. Uncle Martin practically leapt from his seat, fumbling with his blazer button as he approached. "We're absolutely honored to have you here," he said, hand extended. "I'm Martin Caldwell, acting CEO of Sterling Caldwell Group." I glanced at his hand and let the pause linger, just long enough. Then I shook it. "For now," I replied quietly. His brow twitched in confusion, but I had already moved past him, stepping to the head of the long mahogany table, his seat. I placed my portfolio down, flipped it open with precision, and looked out at the stunned board members. "Shall we begin discussing why Sterling Caldwell Group is worth saving?" Martin forced a composed smile as he returned to his seat. "Of course, as you'll see from the Q2 projections. Your projections are flawed." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply slid a new set of reports across the table, each one tabbed and annotated. "The company is hemorrhaging cash," I said evenly. "Your distribution channels in Southeast Asia are collapsing. Your AI logistics platform is 4 years outdated. And half your real estate portfolio is buried under leveraged debt." Gasps rippled through the room. A few heads turned toward Jared and Becca, whose divisions were directly implicated. "How did you—" Jared began, but I spoke over him. "What you need isn't just capital. You need a full-scale restructure. You need a vision rooted in forward-thinking strategy, not nostalgia and nepotism." Martin's face turned a sharp shade of crimson. "With all due respect, we have generations of experience guiding this company." "Into the ground," I finished. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Others didn't look surprised at all. "Would you like to know your current valuation?" I asked calmly. "It's sitting at 29% of what it was 9 years ago." That number made a few mouths fall open. 9 years. I watched the flicker of realization pass over several faces. It had been 9 years since I'd last stood in this room, only to be laughed out, dismissed, silenced. I reached for a second folder and passed it down. Redcrest Holdings already controls 48% of Sterling Caldwell through layered investment arms. A beat of stunned silence. "This offer is for an additional 12%, enough to secure a full 60% controlling interest." Martin stammered. 60%? That would give Redcrest, you, total authority. You'd control the board, the CEO seat, everything. I nodded. "That's correct, including the power to dissolve current leadership." Becca stood up abruptly, eyes wide. "You can't just take this company. It's been in our family for generations." I turned to her slowly. "Is it still a family company?" I asked, voice low but sharp. "Because for 9 years, It wasn't mine. And just like that, the truth settled in. I hadn't just walked back into the room. I now owned it. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or shut out, hit that subscribe button. Because in the next part, they'll learn exactly what it costs to bet against the wrong woman. Because just minutes ago, you were ready to sell to a stranger, I said, my tone steady. Or does family suddenly matter only when your pride is on the line? I rose slowly from my chair, the soft sound of designer heels echoing against the polished wood floor. Every pair of eyes followed me as I circled the boardroom. Would you like to know how Redcrest Holdings grew so powerful so quickly? I asked, stopping behind Martin Caldwell's chair. We targeted companies exactly like this one, run by arrogant men convinced the world would never outgrow them. He stiffened, but I wasn't done. Companies that silenced smart voices because they didn't come in the right package. Companies so obsessed with their own legacy that they forgot to build a future. I paused directly behind him. You ignored people like me because I didn't look like power to you. I didn't sound like it. I didn't play golf at your club. Martin's knuckles whitened as he gripped the arms of his chair. Finally, he asked the only question that mattered. Who are you? I leaned in slightly, my voice low but deliberate. Someone who understands business. Someone you kicked out of this very room less than an hour ago. Recognition crashed over the table like a wave. Jared dropped his phone. Becca slouched back into her seat, eyes wide. Martin's face drained of color. Natalie, he choked. Surprise, I smiled as I returned to the head of the table. Still think I don't understand business? The silence that followed was heavier than any insult they'd ever thrown my way. 9 years of condescension and dismissal, obliterated in a single moment. But I wasn't done yet. I reopened my folder, flipping to the final set of documents. Now, I said coolly, shall we discuss the terms of your surrender, or would you prefer to explain to the shareholders why you rejected a billion-dollar lifeline over your pride? The weight of that question settled into every corner of the room. They knew the choice, and they knew they had already lost. The next hour was not a negotiation. It was a controlled demolition. One by one, I laid out the terms of Redcrest's full takeover. Their eyes darted across the pages as the cost of their arrogance became impossible to ignore. Effective immediately, I said, placing a final document on the table. All current board members will resign, voluntarily. You can't just, Jared started. I can, and I will, I cut in, sliding resignation letters across the polished table. Sign now, or I'll call a shareholder emergency vote and remove you publicly. Martin stared at the letter in front of him, his hand trembling. Everything I built, he murmured. Everything you inherited, I corrected sharply, and nearly destroyed through entitlement and ego. Becca's voice broke the silence, tears cutting through her mascara. But we're family. I stood, planting both hands on the table. Was it family when you blocked every one of my proposals? When you turned my MBA thesis into a punchline? When you told the industry I was just a failed heiress playing business? I asked, tapping a button on the table console. Behind me, the wall screen lit up with a detailed display of financial records. While you were busy flying private, buying vacation homes with company funds, and treating this business like your personal ATM, I was building something real. Redcrest Holdings' portfolio filled the screen. 37 companies, 7 years, every single one turned profitable. The room fell into stunned silence as the numbers spoke for themselves. Return on investment, market share growth, valuations. No spin, no narrative, just undeniable success. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, steady and composed. The Sterling Caldwell Group is being restructured, effective immediately. I turned toward the table. The old board is dissolved. The nepotism ends today. From now on, every leadership role will be earned, not inherited. I pressed another button. Alyssa entered with a sleek stack of sealed folders and placed them one by one in front of each board member. These are your severance packages, generous ones if you sign the NDAs and exit quietly. Martin finally found his voice. And if we refused? I didn't flinch. Instead, I calmly pulled up a second presentation. This time, the documents weren't profit reports. They were audit findings. Flagged transactions, hidden ledgers, internal memos. Then I released these reports to the SEC. The color drained from Martin's face. He knew what was in those files. They all did. Falsified assets, insider trading, tax dodges buried under shell accounts. You wouldn't dare, Jared muttered. Try me. Peter stared blankly at the documents, realization hitting. You've been planning this for years? 7 years, I confirmed. 7 years of silence. 7 years of watching you sabotage your own company while I built a firm strong enough to take it from you. Cleanly, legally, and without a drop of mercy. I walked to the window overlooking Denver's skyline. Glassy towers, wide sky, and the company I now own. You know what the funniest part is? I said, not turning around. If you'd just listened to me 9 years ago, really listened, none of this would have been necessary. My proposals back then could have saved you. When I turned, I saw something I never thought I'd see on their faces. Respect. And just behind it, fear. You have until 5 p.m. to sign, I said, returning to my seat. After that, the offer expires. And I'll do this the hard way, through the courts, through the press, through every shareholder meeting, until there's nothing left of your name in this company. One by one, they picked up their pens. The scratch of ink on paper echoed louder than any protest. Martin was the last. His hand trembled, but he signed. Elisa, I said without looking up, please escort the former board members out. Their access ends now. They stood, dazed and silent, and filed out like ghosts. Martin paused at the doorway, looking back at me. Natalie, we underestimated you. We all did. I looked him square in the eye. Yes, I said. You did. The door clicked shut behind them, sealing the moment. I was alone in the boardroom, the same room where years ago they crushed every dream I had of leading this company. Now it was mine. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Redrest Holdings acquires controlling stake in Sterling Caldwell Group. Stock surges. Sat down in the CEO's chair. My chair. And opened my laptop. There was a company to rebuild. A legacy to reshape. And this time, I would do it my way. I know I'm not the only one who's been underestimated, told to stay quiet, dismissed by people who couldn't see past their own biases. If you've ever been in that position, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from and what they said you couldn't do. Let's stand together, because your story matters just as much as mine. And if you believe in second chances, silent comebacks, and building your own seat at the table, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started. My advice? Don't waste time proving yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Prove it to yourself. Build in silence. Move with purpose. And when your time comes, step into that boardroom with your head high. The ones who tried to break you will have no choice but to watch you rise. Let's make this personal. I see you. I believe in your quiet power. Do you?